What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is obviously part of a series where I focus on a specific director and rank that director's films from worst to best. Now this time obviously it's Judd Apatow's films ranked worst to best, and this is specifically films that he's directed. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Superbad, he's directed that, and it's like, no, he actually didn't direct that, he produced that, and I believe he also wrote it. But, so it's not going to be on the list. So, again, if you look up his films, these are his 6 films specifically that I'll be ranking. 6 being his worst, 1 being his best, in my opinion. Now, obviously this will not focus on, short films, music videos, TV shows, none of that, just specifically films. And obviously if you're new to the channel, I've done other directors. I focus on David Lynch, David Fincher, Wes Anderson, the list goes on. But anyways, enough exposition. Let's get started with Judd Apatow's films ranked worst to best. Kicking off with number 6. His latest film, The King of Staten Island. I wasn't a big fan of this movie, honestly. It has all the holdbacks of most of Judd Apatow's works, honestly. It's overlong, it's poorly paced, it has some funny moments, some, drama that works, but overall, I wasn't really engaged by this movie, unfortunately. I get it, obviously it's someone that's dealing with, life and trying to figure things out, and that's compelling, but I think that how they went about it just wasn't really too compelling for myself. But that being said, I know a lot of people that really dig this movie, and I get why they would. It's just for me personally, I wasn't really able to dig it. But again, I get why people would, just wasn't for me personally. But yeah, that's why it's my number 6. Next up, my number 5 is This Is 40. Now This Is 40, it's not necessarily bad, it's just overlong. It's overlong by like 20-30 minutes. It has its heart in the right place. I liked the messages about how, obviously when you reach 40, a lot of things change, as each decade passes. That's just, part of life. But especially with 40, you start realizing certain things and everything. And I liked also that it was from the perspective of a female. That was something that I thought was really good, because a lot of times Judd Apatow movies are obviously the focal point of a male character. So to see from the perspective of a female, I thought that was really intriguing. Again, not a bad movie. It's just, again, overlong. Some of the cinematography was a little iffy, and again, some of the humor worked, and a lot of it was drama based, but the drama didn't always work. But again, its heart was in the right place, which is why it's number 5. Next up, number 4 is Trainwreck. Now, Trainwreck, I was very positive when I reviewed it on my channel 5 years ago or so. Now, I haven't revisited it since then, but in retrospect, I get what it was going for. I liked, again, its hearts and messages, which, ironically enough, I just mentioned how Judd Apatow's movies don't really focus on a female character, but come to think about it, Trainwreck does have a female character, Amy Schumer, and that is the main focus. And I thought Amy Schumer was really good in this movie. However, just like a lot of his other 2 movies that I mentioned, it's poorly paced, some of the cinematography is a little meh. The side characters are intriguing to say the least, but a lot of this movie does fall into cliche pitfalls of the comedy genre, which, it's a shame, but alas, here we are, and, that's why I like it a little bit better than This Is 40, but it does have its issues, which is why it's not higher up on the list. But, I mean, still, number 4, it's not bad. So yeah, that was my number 4. Next up, number 3 is Funny People, which Funny People I heard about for several years, and truth be told, I didn't get around to it just because of the length. I mean, it's 2.5 hours long, and it's a Judd Apatow movie. So, again, as I already mentioned, Judd Apatow movies are notorious for being overly long, poorly paced, and just easily could have trimmed down like 20-30 minutes. So going into that movie, thinking that, I was like, okay, I'm ready for that now. But coming out of it, I have to say, I didn't have an issue with any of that. Not really in the slightest, actually. I was engaged by this movie. I liked the fact that it was focusing on comedians, but it wasn't focused on laughter. It was focused specifically on them coming up with the routines of, garnering a joke and the making of it. I thought that was something that was really intriguing, to say the least, as well as focusing on the dramatic aspects of their life. That, to me, really was compelling, to say the least, because, I feel like a lot of movies would focus overly on, the jokes itself and not the making of them, as well as how, hey, these are humans too. So I like that, as well as just, again, it's an ensemble cast that is killer. Adam Sandler, I think, in particular, was really good, and, he, when he wants to be, is really good, and I thought his character was very intriguing, to say the least. Now, I'm not sure if I saw the unrated cut or the theatrical cut, but what I will say is I found myself enjoying this movie far more than I was expecting. And that's why it's my number 3. Excuse me. Next up, number 2 is Knocked Up. Knocked Up, I really quite enjoyed. I thought it was very intriguing. Seth Rogen and Katherine Heigl are really good together. It's a Seth Rogen stoner comedy, essentially. Like, he plays a typical stoner like his other roles. But, I really liked that whole aspect of him having to come up to bat and, basically, change certain aspects of him to better himself. I thought that was really interesting. It does have some issues of Judd Apatow's other work, but it still has its heart in the right place. Its themes and messages are interesting, and I think it beats out Funny People a little bit more because I've had more time to digest Knocked Up. Funny People I recently saw, so it's still fresh in my mind, but I'm curious in retrospect, like a year from now, what I will think about which is better. I've seen both only once, but Knocked Up I think I like a little bit more because it was intriguing. I saw it like 4 years ago and it still kind of stuck with me. But yeah, that's why it's my number 2. Now my number 1, most of you probably already know it, but my number 1 is a movie that it was my first Judd Apatow film that I ever saw in terms of his directing work. And my number 1 is The 40-Year-Old Virgin. The 40-Year-Old Virgin, I think, is a movie that was very relatable for me when I watched it years ago. And I've since rewatched it, and it's still pretty funny, although I will say I think the theatrical cut might be better because recently I saw the unrated cut like a year or so ago and I didn't like it quite as much. The pacing and tone were off a little bit more than what I remember when I saw the theatrical cut, but it's still an enjoyable movie, and for me personally, I really dig the themes and messages even more so than any of Judd Apatow's other movies because it is really interesting, and it's something that you really don't see too often of, at least in, when this movie was made. So I think that it was definitely a movie that it changed the comedy genre in terms of during that period of comedies in the 2000s. And honestly, it's also just a joy to see a lot of these actors that at the time weren't famous, but would later become very much so famous. You get to see Jonah Hill in a cameo, and Jonah Hill is really funny in it. And Kevin Hart, I believe he's not really in the theatrical cut, but he is in a major scene in the unrated cut. And in the unrated cut, that scene is hilarious. But again, that one scene doesn't make me say, hey, the unrated cut is the version to see, because what I would say is just watch the theatrical cut and then look online for that Kevin Hart clip, because that Kevin Hart clip is hilarious. But again, it's a rock solid comedy. I like it. I have issues with it, but it's still a movie that I find to be quite enjoyable, and definitely the one I can see myself rewatching multiple times. But yeah, that's my ranking list, guys, for Judd Apatow's films ranked worst to best. Curious to hear your guys' thoughts, but before I do that, I haven't really been doing this for the last couple ranking videos, and I apologize, at least in retrospect, because I believe I didn't really talk about Denis Villeneuve or Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu with what I like about those two directors. So I will talk about Judd Apatow with what I like and what I dislike about him, and overall if I like him as a director. So what I will say is I like that he has his heart in the right place. A lot of his movies are focused on themes and messages that are quite interesting for me personally, and I do like his ensemble cast and how he's able to pick actors and actresses that you wouldn't think would be good in a role, such as the one that it's focused on, but they surprise you, and it's like, wow, that was good stuff. And I also like the fact that he is someone that, for all his flaws, is someone that is true to himself, and I think that's very important. But as I already mentioned, a lot of his movies are very disjointed. They have pacing problems, tone issues, and a lot of the times the unrated cuts of his movies just are a little too self-indulgent for me personally. But other thing is that sometimes his movies have that unfortunate value of being 2 acts of being funny, and then third act it gets super serious, and it just feels, again, dysfunctional. And I don't know, that's for me personally, as many of you probably already know, that's something that for me personally I do take issue with comedy specifically. But again, I get why people like him. I think that he's a solid, comedic director. I don't love his work, but just like a lot of these directors that I focused on, I can see myself, watching, any of his movies that come out, because, he is someone that you can see the talent, even if you can also see many of the flaws. But yeah, guys, I'm curious to hear your guys' ranking list, though, of Judd Apatow's films ranked worst to best. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below on what you think. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Look for the subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.